Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today, we are talking about why high performers burn out and the strategic move that could protect your career. And I think burnout is something that is probably quite close to most of our hearts. I know it's close to mine anyway. It's something that I've dealt with on a number of occasions throughout my career. And this episode came about really because one of our regular listeners, Amanda Henderson from Thread HR, who we absolutely love, listened to our episode on the 5 mindsets great leaders have. And one of those mindsets that we talked about was being uncomfortable, being comfortable. And her question was, when you're used to being out of your comfort zone and stretching and growing, which she's had to do as a founder, what about the times when you need to get comfortable being comfortable? And I think that opens up quite a bit of debate for us, didn't it? Because it's such an important point, because when you are performing and things are going well, there's often a real willingness to be uncomfortable when what you actually need to do is spend some time in your comfort zone and I suppose in your consolidation zone and really maximize those efforts. But I think as humans, we're always trying to make things difficult for ourselves, aren't we? I suppose the first question to kick us off is like, why does this matter?
So, this was a brilliant question when Amanda messaged me and prompted, because I think it really made me think about what we'd spoken about. And I would absolutely advocate that leaders throughout their career need to stretch, need to be willing to do things that don't feel comfortable but are necessary, and need to be willing to acquire new skills, be bad at something in order that they can be good at something. And I think what Amanda has kind of pointed to, and it's definitely something that comes up with other clients, is, but what about when you're used to that? When you are that person that is continually stretching, that is growing, where that is your norm and you are all the time stretching yourself and in that challenge zone. And the point and part of the reason that's come up with so many clients is precisely because of burnout. So when people are ambitious, when they are in that situation where they are so commonly stretching themselves and growing, the risk that can come when you spend too much time in that zone is burnout. And we've done previous episodes and we can link to those in the show notes, but that predominantly is the risk that you can put yourself at if you don't spend some time consolidating and learning to be okay with where you are, what you have, or just giving yourself a break from that continual stretching.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things that I've found with burnout, and it will probably be interesting for people that want to learn more about it to listen to the previous episode that we did. But I always find with burnout that by the time you realize that you are burning out or that you're burnt out, like you're already there and things are starting to happen. Maybe you're becoming ill. There's other things going on there. And you don't realize that you're at that point until you're there. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's about recognizing the symptoms. It's about understanding what it is that you're working towards. Because I think sometimes you can get into these situations because we think we've got a plan, but we haven't really got a solid plan that we're working towards that we can measure against, that tells us that we're on track or we're not. So we just go all out and burn ourselves out. And then we go, what did we do that for? Did we move forward? Did it achieve anything? And now I'm sitting here feeling pretty awful because I pushed. But actually, if I'd had a better plan, if I'd positioned myself in a different way, maybe I wouldn't have got to this point, or maybe I could have recognized the signs and changed direction or asked for some support before now.
Completely. And it's something that I have had so many conversations with clients and coachees about, where either people have sometimes reached a stage of burnout and had to have chunks of time off and are coming back. People are continuing to push and thinking, if I just get this next thing done. And if I reflect back on my own career, I definitely was in that situation where I thought I was okay. I thought I was immune almost, where I could keep pushing because I considered myself to be resilient. And it was only with the benefit of hindsight where I look back and, oh, look at all those changes, look at all of that. And this is the challenge, is that if you spend too much time out of your comfort zone and pushing and stretching, then ultimately your performance decreases rather than increases. And that's why it's so important to be able to gauge and judge and consider, where do I need to be spending time? Which zone do I need to be in? And how can I make sure that I get the balance where I am stretched and growing, but also where I have that recovery and recuperation time, if you like, where I am in my comfort zone and where I can acknowledge that things are going and I don't need to constantly be striving.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So I've got a question for you on that. So why do you think leaders generally don't feel comfortable being comfortable?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's a big one. I think there are a number of elements to it. So there's the work ethic aspect. If I consider my own background and my own experiences, for me, doing less feels lazy. It feels backwards. And a lot of really experienced, strong leaders pride themselves. They feel like, I've worked hard for this, I want to keep it. And not doing as much feels lazy. So feeling like you're in your comfort zone can feel like you're being complacent or you're coasting. And so that feels contrary to their own identity, I guess, of feeling like, I'm somebody who works hard, I'm somebody who has a good work ethic. And then linked to that is this sense of, I've got here because of that work ethic, because I was willing to continually push myself. So I can't rest on my laurels. If I stop working hard or I stop continuing to stretch, then that's all going to go away again. And I won't get any more of the good things that I've been working to. And I feel like maybe actually I'll go backwards or I'll lose things that I've currently got. So it feels like it should be this constant thing of just continuing to grind it out, continuing to get the next project over the line, continuing to deliver the result, rather than feeling that being comfortable is okay. That certainly stems a lot from my experiences, and I definitely see some of those themes reflected in the conversations I have with clients as well.
Yeah, and I suppose that links in quite nicely with why do people push themselves too hard as well? Because I suppose it's one thing getting comfortable, being comfortable, but there's that other side of it where people are really pushing themselves, and what are they pushing themselves for?
Yeah, and I think there's so many different things that feed into this. So how many times have you heard the phrase, you're only as good as your last set of results? So people feel like they're constantly having to prove and reprove themselves, and that you'll only be considered for the next opportunity if you've had a recent big win. So there is this real sense that when you're ambitious, which lots and lots of my clients are, probably pretty much all of them, then if you want to continue and progress in your career, there is then that pressure where you feel like, I can't say no, I can't not take on the extra stretch project, I can't say that can't be done, so I'll just work all the hours in order to do it. And then I think there's also a really good chunk of people who are perfectionists. And again, we've done an episode on how perfectionism can hold back your career, where they feel that everything needs to have their full attention. And even when it's not sustainable, everything that's on their plate feels like it has to be done perfectly. So to them, there's that sense of, if their internal standard is not going to be met, even if somebody else is telling them, you don't need to work this hard or this doesn't need to be, to that standard, because I have that situation with clients where other people are saying you don't need to do that to that standard, or where what they're seeing from others, but their internal drive is huge, that everything has to be done brilliantly. And then also, I think there's a lot of, I want to look after my team. I care about my team. I want to protect them. I don't want them to have to do too much. So that results in people taking things on. And there's a whole other episode around delegation, because one of the most common themes in 360 reviews that people have is that everyone around them is telling them they should delegate more, including their team. And people feel like, no, I've got to protect my team, I've got to look after them, so I will take that on. And so that becomes an added pressure. And then this one really was a case for me of being busy became my identity. Being the troubleshooter, the fixer, the person that could say yes and get things done, would find a way. That became, for me, really tied to who I was and what my work identity was. And that is a really powerful association. And that is incredibly hard to step away from. So even if logically you're listening to us saying, yeah, I get it, it is important sometimes to have some consolidation and to be in your comfort zone, there are a whole myriad of reasons why you've been pushing yourself, and that can make it therefore hard to emotionally say, yeah, okay, actually, I do need to ease up a bit, or there are some times where I need some consolidation. So I get that what we're talking about is easy to say and hard to do, but I think those are some of the reasons why.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. When you said you felt like when you said that you felt like busyness had become your identity, I'm like, yeah, I've been there in the past too. And what I really liked is that when we were talking about the episode, that quote that you said, sometimes it's good for you to do less than you're capable of. And that for me was like, in some ways, felt a little bit scary to think about that. But then in other ways, I was like, that could be really powerful. So what would you say doing less actually looks like in practice?
I think this is really important because, especially when you think about some of those drivers for why people push themselves, and that feeling of needing to achieve and to position themselves, and there is some truth in, if you don't deliver, then that does affect people's perception of you. So you can't just ignore all of that and say none of that matters. But I think what really counts when it comes to doing less is considering where are some of the areas where it could be possible. For example, what I would talk to clients about is it means doing fewer things rather than lower quality. So if you are a perfectionist, if you strive to deliver a good result, you are never going to accept and be comfortable with doing less if that means being slapdash or being lazy or not caring about the end result. Whereas if you consider, what do I and or my team have capacity to deliver? And again, you do have to acknowledge, deliver well rather than deliver perfectly. But what can we deliver well and really be ruthless about prioritization? And I've talked before about the exercise of really brain dumping everything from your head and picking out 3 things to focus on for the here and now. And that feels so counterintuitive for busy leaders. But what happens then is when you're focused on fewer things, you get momentum with those things. You make more moves more quickly with those things because you're not trying to hold up everything. So I think that practice of really ruthless prioritization, knowing what are the key 3 things, that's a really simple, not easy, but simple step that can then lead to, okay, now what felt overwhelming and huge and a constant striving can now feel a sense of momentum and moving forward on things that actually are going to have the biggest impact.
And I think that's key, isn't it? It's knowing what is having or what will have the most impact, whether that's on your role or whether that's on your career generally. And I think it's about taking that pause to think about it, isn't it? And really looking at it and asking yourself, or even looking for a mentor to support you with that. because sometimes you just can't see the woods for the trees when you're stuck in it, when you're in that daily grind, when you've got that huge to-do list, when everything feels like it's a priority. Sometimes taking that pause is the hardest thing, but the best thing that you can actually do at that point. So I suppose finally just thinking about all of this stuff and really reflecting on how to move forward in this situation. How do you reassure yourself that it's okay to be comfortable sometimes, to really lean into that comfort zone and to maximize the impact?
I love the wording of that question because I think this really speaks to the heart of what is so important. Reassuring yourself that it's okay is really the heart of it. So much of this is about how you consider and how you trust yourself that you are going to be okay when you're in your comfort zone. Because if you have had a habit of constantly being busy and striving and stretching and growing, then feeling comfortable will feel alien, potentially will feel lazy, unless you have that reassurance that you are doing it for a reason. So the analogy I tend to share with clients when we're talking about some of this is that of an athlete. So when you are physically fit, an athlete does not go to every single training session with the same intensity. They will have times and periods where they are absolutely going hard. They are building endurance, strength, skill, whatever it may be, and they will be really pushing to do that. But built into that will be rest and recovery, because overtraining is going to lead to injury. If you are constantly pushing yourself to the very limits physically, then you will have an injury, and that will hold you back, and it will slow you down, and it will decrease rather than increase performance. And leadership is a game of mental fitness. And mental fitness is all of those same principles, where there are times where you will go hard and you will push and you will stretch. And that's key for peak performance. And if you're seeking excellence and you're seeking to get better than where you are today, that's a part of it. But equally, that rest and recovery and time in your comfort zone is a part of that. So when you're in your comfort zone, the point is to not just pause, but actually to recharge. And this is something that often comes up, is thinking about what are the things that recharge you? How do you gain energy? How do you properly switch off from a day at work so that you can go back tomorrow or next week feeling energized and ready to go again? And so I think it's that sense of remind yourself you're not meant to be at 100% all of the time. You're meant to balance periods of intensity and periods of recuperation. And I think people will learn to recognize the signs. If you're constantly wired, if you're struggling to sleep, if you're snappy with your family, you will recognize the signs. And that's so often that's how this comes up in conversation with clients, because they're recognizing some of those things where work is not feeling good, where they're losing a sense of attachment or purpose to what they're doing, why they're doing it. And it just feels like a grind. So I think it's about recognizing those signs and reminding yourself, if you were doing a physical plan, this is the approach you take: periods of intensity, periods of rest. And so when it comes to mental fitness, which is what's crucial in leadership, you need to apply exactly the same thing and have ways to recharge your mental energy, ways to take breaks, and ways to feel good. And that means your comfort zone is more than good enough.
Yeah, and I think as well, when you're pushing, there's always that imposter syndrome that creeps in as well. When you get into that burnout point, I think that's where people also start feeling a little bit of an imposter, because they can't handle everything. They can't get everything done. They're not achieving what they want to achieve. And it's interesting, the psychology behind it all and how all of this stuff links in so nicely together. And once you understand it and you pick it all apart, you can go, right, I can actually create a plan to move forward. I can make the maximum impact, and I can enjoy the journey, and I can enjoy my life outside of work as well. And I think that's just such a great position to get to. And I know this is exactly what you work with your clients on. And the stories that I've heard from Jackie lately about the transformations with clients has just been unreal. So if you are listening to this episode and you're recognizing some of these patterns and you feel like you're either in this zone or you're thinking you've wanted to get out of this zone for a while, then get in touch and Jackie can share the coaching options with you, because it might just be that you need to thrash it all out, create a plan, and start to think about how you can move forward, making the most impact in the easiest way possible. So thank you for listening. If you found this episode useful or interesting, please do share it with someone else. And as usual, rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform so more people can hear about the podcast. And we will be back next time with another episode.